For close to 15 years, I spent somewhere north of $200 a season on bug sprays, dusts, and traps from the garden center. Mexican bean beetles still took half my crop in 2015. Then I watched Eli walk his garden with a pump sprayer and a $1 jug of strong vinegar, and his beans were untouched. The reason you have not heard about this is not because it does not work. It is because in the late 1990s, when concentrated vinegar started getting registered as a pesticide, the herbicide industry made sure the registration was hard, expensive, and state by state. Today, it is restricted in roughly 24 states. Stay with me to the end, because I am going to show you the exact mix Eli used and the timing trick that makes it work twice as well. Let me tell you what 2015 looked like on this homestead. I had a 40-foot row of bush beans, and by the second week of July, the Mexican bean beetles had skeletonized roughly half of it. I had already spent more than $200 at the garden center that season. 7 dust, a pyrethrin spray, a copper soap I thought was the natural answer, and none of it slowed those beetles down for more than a few days. Half the crop gone. Now here is what was sitting 40 yards away the whole time. The authority I am talking about is not some shadowy bunch of villains. It is the synthetic pesticide and herbicide industry that has dominated state-level pesticide registration in this country since the late 1990s. Around that same time, 20% acetic acid, concentrated horticultural vinegar, moved into the EPA's minimum risk pesticide category under FIFRA, the section called 25B. And then it ran into a wall. Roughly 24 states will not let you buy it for pest control today because no commodity manufacturer will pay 50 separate state registration fees on a generic ingredient nobody owns. Meanwhile, the average American gardener is spending between $150 and $300 a season on chemical sprays that do not outperform a $1 vinegar mix the Lancaster County Amish have been using for decades. Late June of 2016, I finally walked over the fence and asked Eli why his pole beans were clean while mine looked like lace. He waved me into the buggy shed. There was a 1-gallon jug of 20% vinegar on the bench and a pump sprayer right next to it. Eli used to say something I have carried with me ever since. You don't need anything stronger than what's already on the shelf. You just need to know when to spray it. What he handed me that morning was not a kitchen cabinet item. The vinegar most people have under the sink is 5% acetic acid, fine for salad dressing, useless on a bean beetle. What Eli kept in the shed was 20% horticultural vinegar, 4 times stronger, sold in feed stores and ag supply catalogs across Pennsylvania for between $8 and $12 a gallon. That gallon mixes out to roughly 4 gallons of finished spray, enough to treat about a 1/4 acre. So when I tell you the per application cost is about $1, that is the math. Pennies of vinegar plus a teaspoon of dish soap. Pennsylvania is one of the states where you can still walk into a feed store and buy this off the shelf without a license. Most of the Amish farms around Bird in Hand have a jug of it somewhere, in the buggy shed, in the milk house, on a workbench. It is treated like baking soda. It is not exotic, and it is not a secret to anyone inside the tradition. And that is exactly the kind of thing the herbicide industry would rather you not know about. Because the moment you know, the math on every shelf in their pest control aisle stops working in their favor. Now, why does it actually work? Because if you understand the mechanism, you understand why no patent could ever lock this down. 20% acetic acid does not poison an insect through its nervous system the way a synthetic pyrethroid does. It does something simpler. On contact, it desiccates the soft cuticle of immature beetles, aphids, cabbage worms, and squash bug nymphs, pulls the moisture right out of them. At the same time, it crashes the pH on the leaf surface so dramatically that fungal spores, early blight on tomatoes, powdery mildew on squash, failed to germinate where the spray landed. So one application is hitting the soft-bodied bugs and the early disease pressure in the same pass. Eli explained it with 8 words. He used to say, "It just dries them up, same way salt does to a slug, only quicker." That was his whole pesticide chemistry course. And here is the part that mattered to him. Beneficials, your ladybugs, your bees, your hoverflies, are not active at dawn when the leaf surface is still cool. So, if you spray at the right window, you hit the pests and you spare the helpers. The mechanism is so simple, there is nothing to patent, nothing proprietary, nothing for a chemical company to put a brand name on and charge $30 a quart for, which is the whole problem from the industry's perspective. Here is the exact mix Eli used, the same one I have been running on this homestead for almost a decade now. 1 quart of 20% horticultural vinegar, 3 quarts of clean water, 1 teaspoon of plain liquid dish soap. And I mean plain, not the antibacterial kind, because the antibacterial agents kill the surfactant action you need. Mix that in a 1-gallon pump sprayer, shake until the soap is distributed, and spray the underside of the leaves until just before runoff. Not until it drips, just until the leaf glistens. You do not spray flowering crops at midday, ever, because that is when your pollinators are working. You spray at dawn on the underside of the leaf, where the pests actually live. The summer after Eli showed me, I ran the same 40-foot bean row that had been wiped out the year before. Same soil, same variety, same beetle pressure rolling in from the field edge. I mixed the spray exactly the way he showed me. 1 dawn application. Walked the row the next morning with a coffee cup in one hand and counted dead beetles on the ground. Roughly 95% knockdown. The plants were untouched. Same row, 1 year apart. The only difference was a $1 pass with a pump sprayer instead of $200 of products from a garden center. And you do not see this on any garden center shelf because no one is allowed to sell it to you in this form in roughly half the country. Now here is the part that took me 20 years of paying attention to figure out. Even most people who have heard of the vinegar trick get this wrong because they think the goal is to kill the beetle they can see. The adult Mexican bean beetle that lands on your plant in mid-June is not your real problem. Your real problem is the larvae, those soft yellow grubs on the underside of the leaf, the next generation. By the time the adults are visible, the eggs have already been laid. Eli never sprayed reactively, he sprayed preemptively. He hit the bean plants for the first time at the first true leaf stage, before any pressure was visible. He hit them again at flowering, and he ran a 14-day rotation through June and July, light passes, dawn windows, never letting a generation get established. The Amish gardens around Bird in Hand have been doing this on that exact rhythm for over 30 years. And nobody in those gardens has ever observed beetle resistance. Not once, not in 3 decades. The reason is that acetic acid attacks structural integrity. There is no biochemical pathway for an insect to evolve around "don't get dried out." You cannot mutate your way past being made mostly of water. This is the kind of generational, no-input pest control that the entire chemical pesticide aisle is built to make you forget existed. Now, what I have shared with you today is a real piece of the puzzle, but it is still just one piece. The vinegar spray is what Eli called the manual layer, the last of 5 concentric defenses he taught me, all laid out in Chapter 7, the 5 defense layers of Homestead Hank's 30-day Amish garden protocol. Healthy soil, companion planting, physical barriers, beneficial habitat, and then this. If you are tired of the input treadmill and you want everything I learned from Eli over the years organized into a single 30-day, day-by-day plan, it is $19.99 at homesteadhankbooks.com. If you are watching on the television, the QR code is up on the screen. Go ahead and grab your phone and point it at it. If you are on your phone or laptop, the link is right there in the description. Take your time pulling that up. I am not going anywhere. All right, let's keep going. The mechanism behind the suppression is structural, built into the way pesticide registration works in this country. In the late 1990s, 20% acetic acid was reviewed by the EPA under FIFRA Section 25B, the minimum risk pesticide category. The wall it ran into was at the state level. Every U.S. state requires its own separate annual pesticide registration on top of the federal review. Typical fees run between $200 and $700 per product, per state, per year. That is roughly $30,000 a year to maintain registration in all 50 states. A patentable synthetic pesticide absorbs that cost easily because the manufacturer holds the patent and prices accordingly. A commodity like 20% vinegar, sold by 50 different brands at $3 a quart wholesale, has no single owner willing to pay those fees forever. So the registration lapses or it never gets filed at all. California, New York, Massachusetts, Michigan, Connecticut, Washington, those are the kinds of states that enforce strictly. Pennsylvania does not, which is part of why the Amish in Lancaster County never lost the practice. Now, the obvious counterargument. 20% vinegar is a real skin and eye irritant. Wear gloves, wear eye protection, same as the label says. I am not pretending it is sugar water, but that is not the reason it is restricted. OSHA-regulated chemicals far harsher than this are sold openly in the same states. The restriction is structural, not safety-based. The average American gardener spends between $150 and $300 a season on store-bought pest control that does not outperform a $1 vinegar pass. Run that out over 30 years, and you are looking at somewhere between $4,500 and $9,000 of garden center spending that produced no better results than what Eli kept in his buggy shed. Which brings me to the timing trick I promised you at the top. This is what makes the whole thing work twice as well, and it is the part most people miss. 2 parts. Part 1, spray within the first 90 minutes after sunrise on a cool, overcast morning when the leaf surface temperature is below 65 degrees. At that temperature, the bean beetles, squash bugs, and cabbage worms on the underside of the leaves are still cold sluggish. They cannot fly off, they cannot drop, and the vinegar contact rate is much higher. Eli observed roughly 95% knockdown at dawn versus roughly 50% on a warm afternoon. That is your twice as well. Part 2. Spray once at the first true leaf stage, then again exactly 7 days later. 7 days is not a guess. It maps to the bean beetle's egg to larva development time, so the second pass catches the hatch from eggs laid before the first spray. Most folks who try vinegar once do it in the afternoon, skip the second pass, and conclude it does not work. That is not a failed method. That is a failed protocol, and that is the kind of generational knowing the chemical aisle was never built to compete with. All right, before I let you go, if the vinegar trick made sense to you, you are going to want the rest of it. Chapter 9 of the book, The Amish Pest Protocol, walks you pest by pest through everything else Eli used. Hornworms, squash bugs, cabbage worms, aphids, deer, rabbits, all of it. No chemicals, organized into the same 30-day, day-by-day plan. Now you have the knowledge they did not want you to have. And if you want the complete pest protocol Eli ran on his farm for over 50 years, it is at homesteadhankbooks.com. Scan the QR code on screen if you are on the television, or tap the description link if you are on your phone. Go ahead and grab that now. I will give you a moment. So that is the dollar mix and the Dawn Plus 7 days timing the Lancaster County Amish have been using for 3 decades, while the rest of the country was buying chemicals that did not work as well. Now you know what your great-grandparents knew before the chemical aisle existed. Next time around, I am going to walk you through the open-pollinated bean varieties Eli's family saved for generations specifically because they resist beetle pressure structurally. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I will see you in the next one.